Funding for Decibel is provided by Texas Mutual Insurance.
The resource of water that's in the river almost certainly isn't going to be enough.
Turn it on, it's always delivering high quality water, and people maybe have the misconception that it's limitless.
Good evening, I'm Judy Maggio. We're bringing you tonight's Decibel from the Austin Central Library. This beautiful building is actually a water conservation model for the world. The design is essentially drought-proof. By capturing rainwater on the rooftop and tapping into the city's reclaimed water system, this library only has to buy about 15% of the water it uses. The availability of safe, clean water is threatened by a rising number of extreme droughts and floods, runoff from development, and the demands of a rapidly growing population. For the next half hour, we'll look at the pressures on Austin's water supply, solutions in the works, and the part we can all play in making sure water is still flowing for future generations. We begin with Water 101, the basics and beyond.
The biggest misconception about Austin is that we're a lake city. And in fact, we're a river city. Austin was founded because of the river, because of its water. We've lost the reality of those lakes being actually a river.
Austin is ideally situated on both sides of the Colorado River, our sole source for drinking water.
All of our water is a surface water supply. It all comes from the Colorado River system. Sometimes people get confused with all the aquifers, but Austin water, we don't get any water from groundwater.
Dams along the Colorado River form our surrounding lakes, essentially our water reservoirs.
We take water out of the river at Lake Travis and Lake Austin. We have 3 drinking water plants, and we treat the water there. People use that water, and then everything that goes down the drain goes to 2 wastewater plants that are downstream of Austin.
Dr. Kevin Anderson is a geographer and urban watershed expert who runs environmental research for Austin Water. Looking at the luscious landscape and ponds here, it's hard to imagine this is where the sludge generated by the wastewater treatment plants is pumped and repurposed.
We separate water from the solids to thicken that material for the treatment process. The water that we take out of the sludge that arrives goes into these treatment ponds. The solids go into a process that mimics our own digestion process. Hornsby Bend's basically a big microbe farm.
Hornsby Bend isn't just the end of our water pipeline, it's an important part of Austin's ecosystem. Human waste and our yard trimmings are recycled in the most natural ways here, making it not only a popular place for ecotourism, but one of the best birding sites in Texas. So you've seen the Austin water system from start to finish. The city-owned utility gets high marks for innovation and efficiency. But what happened last fall when the city told its 1 million plus water customers to boil their water before drinking it?
So we try to piece together all these different clues. The rate at which
We asked Dr. Jay Banner, who runs the Environmental Science Institute at UT.
We had so much rain last fall that our water purification, our water treatment systems were overwhelmed with sediment and bacteria. And so that's why we had a citywide boil water notice.
Dr. Banner says our future water supply is challenged in many different ways. Climate change means we're more prone to intense and frequent droughts and floods. Then there's the impact of more people and more development.
As we build cities, we replace the natural landscape of trees and vegetation and soil, which serve as really great filters for water, for purifying it before it enters the ground. Once we strip all of that away and replace it with roadways, parking lots, rooftops, collectively what we call impervious cover, all of a sudden we've removed that natural filtration capacity for the landscape and water quality starts degrading.
Austin's been lucky that our flood-controlled lakes have had enough capacity to handle most of our heavy rains, and we've successfully weathered long drought spells. But luck doesn't last forever, and we can no longer take this precious resource for granted.
As we look out and another 2 million people are coming, the resource of water that's in the river almost certainly isn't going to be enough.
Austin does have a new roadmap to try to navigate these growing demands on our water supply for decades to come. It's called Water Forward.
Hi, I'm Marisa Flores Gonzalez. I work for the Austin Water Utility, and I'm the Water Forward Program Manager. And here are 5 things that you need to know about Austin's Water Forward Integrated Water Resource Plan. Number 1, what is Water Forward? Water Forward is a 100-year water plan to create a resilient water future for our community through droughts and through potential climate change impacts that we might see in the future. Number 2, how does Water Forward reduce demand? The Water Forward plan reduces future demands by making our landscapes more drought tolerant, by reducing the amount of leaks in our city's water distribution system, and by providing information to water utility customers about their water usage so that they can identify potential leaks and also manage their water bills. Number 3, how does Water Forward increase water recycling? The Water Forward plan increases our use of recycled water so that we can use this water for outdoor irrigation or for flushing toilets within our buildings. Number 4, how does Water Forward address drought? Large-scale storage strategies in Water Forward ensure that we have enough supply through future droughts and climate change. Number 5, how can you get involved? Austin Water is implementing the plan now, and we want to have diverse voices engaged in our implementation of the plan. We'll have further stakeholder engagement opportunities, including meetings and workshops and webinars, and we want you to be involved.
Some Central Texans are already making saving and recycling water a way of life, from urban farming to harvesting rainwater to xeriscaping a garden like the one here at the library. Joe Rocha and Angela Maldonado discovered water conservation can come in many different forms.
We turn on our tap and we kind of take it for granted. It's always, turn it on, it's always delivering high quality water, and people maybe have the misconception that it's limitless, when in fact we do have limits to our water resources, and we have to make sure that we manage them in a way that's sustainable. And so therefore in that given dry year, it'll grow more slowly and have a thinner ring. And so there's probably no one magical thing that will fix it for us, and we probably have to move forward on all of them, right? So they come amongst the areas of conservation. We have to figure out how can we use less, and also technology. How can technology provide more? How can we find new sources? How can we create new sources?
When it comes to drought, here's how one Austin farmer puts those conservation practices to use.
The single biggest issue for any residential gardener in Austin is using city water and figuring out how to conserve it, how to better utilize what you have. And then the initial immediate thing was, my water bill, my utility bill is skyrocketed as I've committed to this. What can I do to change that? We harvest them because the trees are all around our farm. With food production, we're thousands of gallons of water a week going through the system, but even in the hottest part of the season, you can store the water. And it's just about usage. If you look at the rest of our property where we're not growing food, we're not irrigating any grass, we're not irrigating any decorative stuff. And I'm cognizant of how I use my resources, not just running irrigation to water St. Augustine, but thinking about, what can I do with what I have? We just got free IBC totes. There's tons of landscaping companies. If you reach out, you can find these 300, 400 gallon totes, have them, wash them out, clean them. And then we're going to daisy chain all this together. So right now we have almost 3,000 gallons of rain catchment. An inch of rain off of a rancher this size is, over 1,000 gallons. The problem is, do we get the rain events? And then how much storage do you have to carry you through those rain events? And that's, for agricultural production, we need a much bigger catchment system.
The majority of our clients for potable systems are here in the Hill Country, and the reason for that is mostly because well water is poor quality and really not reliable. City of Austin customers have the ability to turn on a tap very easily and have their water delivered to them without thinking about where it's coming from or the treatment technique. Most customers in Hayes County and in Dripping Springs really have to think about where that water comes from. So this is a 40,000-gallon rainwater cistern, and it's intended for use for not only indoor use for the customers, but also for irrigation and pool fill supply. So in order to make that rainwater potable and bring it back inside for indoor use, we run it through a couple of different filtration techniques. There are a lot of regulatory barriers to using rainwater in systems that are both in the city or out here in the Hill Country. So I think that people are ready to accept some of the different water technologies like rainwater and gray water reuse. I think they're ready to introduce them back into sort of the lexicon of rural water use or urban water use. But it has been a bit of an uphill battle. So if we're putting a rainwater system on for indoor use, we're building you a water utility. So they're high dollar and they typically are wrapped up in new construction. That said, City of Austin has incredible rebates for rural water users.
If saving rainwater is good for those dry days, too much rain needs a different kind of planning.
All the water that comes from Miller drains down into the streetscape, goes through pipes, and actually comes out that outlet structure. The pond here is actually 3 ponds in one. Eventually, the water does flow through into the creek, and if there was to be a large flood situation, this is a dam, and it overflows into this structure here. If we don't slow it down, like this pond does, it goes directly into a creek, and it scours the creek, but it also makes the floodplain larger.
Local nonprofit GAVA works to make sure the city and community don't forget the flood-prone Dove Springs neighborhood.
The new development that you see has nice, deep detention ponds and good drainage lines. And unfortunately, that has not been addressed in the older neighborhoods.
We have a lot of neighborhoods all around the city that were built prior to the current understanding of flood risk in the city. And we actually have several watersheds that go through Dove Springs, the biggest of which is Onion Creek. And unfortunately, we had several neighborhoods that were built really close to the creek in what we now know was the 25-year floodplain.
Both floods in 2013 and 15, they hit at night. So people woke up to their houses filling up with water, to their bedroom. You know, people got out of bed in feet of water. And some people got washed away or almost washed away. And so those are really intense, traumatic experiences.
There's several projects in the works for the current bond package in our 5-year plan for the department. There are some storm drain improvement projects planned in the Dove Springs area, and we will continue to work on the last remaining buyouts in that one neighborhood and kind of continue with doing floodplain restoration on that land now that the buyouts are done.
I don't want people to forget that, you know, people's lives are at stake. And if we don't do anything about how to plan appropriately for Lower Onion Creek and the people that live in East Austin, then we're going to continue to be victims and get displaced or die.
Most of the environmental conservation programs for solar panels or for rainwater collection at the household level, they're all rebate programs. So like almost anything else, if you have the money up front, you can save. So we just have to make sure that we're leading from a place of equity in all of our environmental initiatives, or we end up just widening the gap between who is less impacted and who bears more of the brunt.
Sometimes the threats to our water come from both Mother Nature and humans.
You've probably heard about zebra mussels wreaking havoc with Austin's water supply. They landed in Lake Austin, crawled into raw water pipes, and died, producing foul-smelling tap water for a few days. Austin Water is using chemicals, mechanical cleaning, and even divers to fight them. But a local startup has another idea, utilizing cancer screening technology to detect and prevent the mussels from invading. Samantha Guzman has the story of ECO.
Turning on a tap is not just turning on a tap. There's a whole system of infrastructure in place there. And things that we do as a community greatly impact our ability to provide clean water.
Biologist John Higley worked for years as a cancer researcher. Now, he's hoping to use that experience to attack a new problem, zebra mussels.
My background is in molecular biology, specifically early stage cancer research and biopharmaceutical development. And we're leveraging those technologies to help the environment. Right now, we're focused on zebra mussels and quagga mussels, kind of like the cancer of the lake.
Higley says zebra mussels are similar to cancer because they can grow quickly, spread, and completely change the ecosystem of a body of water. So what are they exactly?
They're kind of similar to maybe a clam or something like that. They're much smaller though. So zebra mussels are only maybe like an inch long, and they're so tiny, but they grow so fast, and so they just encrust things.
Not only can zebra mussels clog infrastructure, they are also high-efficiency filter feeders, which means they eat all of the primary food sources in a lake, disrupting many of the existing food chains. But there is one thing they don't eat.
Zebra mussels do not eat toxic algae. They spit it right back out. And the problem with that is that then the lake, having none of its native algae anymore, is a perfect breeding ground for the toxic algae to bloom and create pretty significant health hazards.
Right now, cities typically send out researchers that use nets and collect water samples to check if zebra mussels are in a water body.
They use something called PCR, traditional PCR, and this is just where basically they take a water sample and they're looking for either presence or absence of zebra mussel DNA. We use something called qPCR, quantitative PCR, so we can actually tell you how many copies of that DNA are in the water. It's also very sensitive technology, so we can pick up things quite early before there's even a reproducing population.
Instead of using traditional methods requiring a lot more manpower, ECO uses an automated collector installed on a water body. The collector draws in water samples and then sends them through a series of filters. Those filters catch all of the biological material from the water and are then sent to ECO's lab for analysis.
So we can look at what genes are being turned on in the population and off. So that allows us to predict when a spawn's going to happen, figure out if they're responding to stress in a way that we want them to for mitigation efforts. So if we're treating with chemical or something along those lines, we can start seeing early stage stress responses, later stage stress responses, and eventually death. And so you can start mapping what the population is doing so you can have better understanding of what to do to address the issue.
Just like with fighting cancer, Higley believes early detection can lead to better outcomes.
If you do early screening, you can knock out cancer way earlier than when it's metastatic. And right now, a lot of the people that are invested in water, they're not trying to treat the cancer until it's already metastatic, and that's already a terminal patient.
And just because many lakes in Texas are already infested with zebra mussels, ECO hopes their work can still inspire people to adopt preventative measures.
It's not hopeless, because there's still plenty of water bodies in Texas that don't have them. Don't just think that, okay, well, it's inevitable, they're coming downstream, right? Like, let's just sit here and watch it happen. There are still things that can be done.
I'm one of those swimmers who relishes a dip in the cold, clear waters of Barton Springs. But cleaning this crown jewel is just one of the challenges facing Austin Aquatics. Blair Waltman-Alexan looks at how the city is trying to keep Austin's aging public pool system afloat.
Folks in Central Texas love a good spot to take a dip on a hot summer day. And no place fits the bill better than the neighborhood pool. They're often the most clean, accessible, and safe option for swimmers. But most of Austin's pools are old and sinking into disrepair. A new influx of bond money is aimed at keeping some of the locations afloat, but the question remains, what depths will the city need to go to in order to save its pools?
Well, Barton Springs is, the crown jewel of Austin. Barton Springs is closed Thursdays between 9 a.m. and 7 p.m. It's closed for cleanings. They scrub the limestone rocks to get algae off of there. They clean the handles on the railings of the ramps and steps as you get into the pool. It takes a lot to maintain a natural spring. There's the City of Austin, the Parks and Recreation Department. Friends of Barton Springs Pool is a volunteer organization that organizes community and corporate pool cleanings. There's a lot of people who love this place and want to see it protected.
Barton Springs isn't the only pool that needs some TLC. Most of the pools were built between 1930 and 1990, meaning that even some of the newest ones are almost 30 years old. That's roughly the end of a pool's lifespan. Officials say 12 locations are in critical condition and are expected to fail in the next 5 years. Issues range from cracked concrete to scrounging up parts for pumps that aren't even made anymore.
Because when you get pools that old, some of the companies don't even exist anymore.
This is Jonathan Tapscott, better known as Tap. As an Austin Parks and Rec pool mechanic, he has spent a lot of time here at Gibbons Pool. Mechanics have been battling a massive leak for several years.
All the repair work was good. It slowed it down a lot. Pool built in '58, so you have everything that runs underneath, stuff you can't see. Like once it goes through that wall, that's how the water gets all the way around the pool. So you have to realize that that plumbing is still from '58. But we just had an ailing pool problem.
And the city is aware of that problem.
Our pools are on life support. We've been triaging them and moving on.
In 2018, the City Council approved the Aquatic Master Plan, a 750-page guide on how to best maintain the city's pool system. That is being used to decide how to best divvy up bond money that was voted on last November. But that is far less than the $124 million the pool advocates initially pushed for, and less than the roughly $200 million needed to fully renovate Austin's pools.
I've learned from TAP that you know if a pool's running right when you walk up, because you see if there's motion.
Allison Orr is the artistic director at Forklift Dance Works. For the past 3 years, her group has worked with communities to tell the story of their local pools through an interpretive performance that takes place in the water.
We've been leading a project called My Park, My Pool, My City. It's our first one premiered here at Bartholomew Pool in the summer of 2017. And the show also featured lifeguards and community members, but it was really from the point of view of the maintenance guys, telling the story of what it takes to maintain over 50 bodies of water.
She's learned that while pools are often one of the linchpins of a neighborhood, many don't have the volunteer muscle and private funding that other sites have.
So when we started this project, aquatics was actually in a master planning process for the future of our city pools. And I got to see a map of where people have access to safe swimming around our city. And when you look at that map, it becomes very clear that Northeast, Southeast Austin residents do not have the same kind of equitable access to safe swimming pools as people who live Northwest Central Austin. I didn't understand at all the fight that communities have had to face to really even get their pools open, funded, built.
But if you build it, they will swim. Bartholomew Pool in East Austin was condemned in 2009. 3 years after it reopened, usage has tripled. And Orr's projects have shown her that people don't just consider the pools a nice spot to spend a sunny day. They're also a key part of the community.
We have really learned a lot about what pools in our city provide for children, young people, older people, for all of us.
I've been around them, like I said, all my life, and it's always been a gathering place for friends and family.
Whether it's pools, toilets, or sinks, there's a big demand for people who can install them and fix them. Meet Savannah, a young woman who has found her calling as an all-star plumber, pipe fitter, and welder. Fumi Agunro has the story.
My name is Savannah Marvetts. I am 23 years old. I'm a pipe fitter with the local 286. That wall behind the toilet, this is what is behind the wall. My senior year in high school, I was introduced to an ag mechanics program that I took. It was then that I started welding and I realized that I actually enjoy this and I could be good at it. And right now we are setting the carriers to where they need to be set for when we put the water. I have to say that pipe fitting is my favorite because for plumbing there's a code that you have to follow to make sure it's right and that everything will run smoothly. For pipe fitting, you look at the space you have and you look at what needs to be ran where and how to get to it, and it's kind of just one giant puzzle piece, and I like puzzles. Coming into this trade as a woman, I wasn't one bit scared of what might happen. What I was afraid of was the age difference. there's such a huge gap in age difference. You've got all these people who are trying to retire, and then you've got this gap, and then you have the apprentices who are trying to fill that gap. As long as you show that you want to learn and that you want to work, no one will give you any crap. Frustrating can happen, but in the end, you'll come back, look at your product, and be like, man, I built that.
Our journey covering Austin's water issues took us to some fascinating spots, including the breathtakingly beautiful West Cave Preserve in southwest Travis County. We leave you tonight with the sights and sounds of this natural treasure. Thanks so much for spending some of your evening with us.
Funding for Decibel is provided by Texas Mutual Insurance.